Hear the whispers from within, balance to restore, ailings to relieve. Feel the nature keeping us, nature healing us, flowers, leaves, and roots within. Hear the mind calming you, soothing you, love and kindness inside out. Let the herbs from middle world feel. Welcome wellness, welcome wellness. It's revealed herbs, middle world herbs.
Hello and welcome to the Middle World Herbs Natural Wellbeing Series, where we talk about restoring and maintaining your health in safe and natural ways while incorporating both the physical and the emotional sides of healing. We go live once a week on Thursdays at 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and each week we talk about a different aspect of health. Well, today's episode is called Truth About Metabolic Syndrome, and we're focusing on a lesser known, simple, and very actionable ways of keeping your metabolic health functioning well and supporting it whenever it calls for help. So even though many people don't call it metabolic syndrome, the issue affects 1 in 6 adults. So it's very prevalent here in the United States, and it includes high blood pressure, high blood sugar, excessive belly fat, and abnormal cholesterol levels. So if those sound like some of the issues maybe you're dealing with, listen up, because we have a great episode for you today. You're going to learn about simple lifestyle changes that can protect your metabolic health from acting out, and about the best supplements to help your body regulate your weight, your cholesterol, and your blood sugar levels. So we've selected the top 20 hardest questions from our listeners, and we are going to get them all answered today. My name is Deanne. I will be your host, and I have our special guest, Dr. Jacquie Leone, with me. She's a naturopathic medical doctor, board-certified holistic nutritionist, and psychology enthusiast. So welcome, Dr. Jacquie. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Hello. All right, so why don't you go ahead and do an introduction and maybe talk a little bit about the most common metabolic health issues you're seeing with your patients.
Yes, of course. Okay, so I'm a naturopathic doctor, for those of you who may or may not know. Naturopathy is unique in that it is a 4-year medical degree. However, the way that we're trained to view and address both disease and health is a little bit different than the conventional medical approach that currently exists. So we're going to look for the root cause of most problems versus giving medications or pharmaceutical interventions first. We also have that tool in our toolbox. It's just not our first line of defense. So speaking of the root cause, there are a ton of issues that are the root cause of different disease states, and a lot of them do stem from metabolic disturbance. So I've treated a lot of metabolic disorder. Whether it's, because of stress or obesity or prediabetes, high cholesterol, usually a combination. You need 3 of the 5 criteria to be technically diagnosed with metabolic syndrome. So I've seen a lot of it, because metabolic syndrome and metabolic issues are usually early indicators for full-blown disease states, especially type 2 diabetes, hypertension, hyperlipidemia, which is like high cholesterol, as well as a plethora of other things. So I have dealt with it a lot, and I don't know, I just think it's something that overall, if people were to address at the root cause and at that foundational level, we would see those numbers go significantly lower. Because I know you said 1 in 6. That's a crazy statistic. I knew 30 to 40% of Americans, but when you really stop and think about it like that, it's like, that's a lot of people being afflicted from something that is preventable. So that is the good news.
All right, yes. Well, before we jump into all the hard questions, which you get to answer, I just want to introduce everyone to the 3 supplements that I have here in front of me from Middle World Herbs. And you guys probably want to keep these handy at home, especially if your doctor warned you about pre-diabetes, hypertension, or if it seems like your weight is just creeping up. So Middle World Berberine with bitter melon and banana leaf. That one's right here. That one is $21.99 on Amazon. And then we have our Middle World prebiotics and probiotics. This one's $22.99 on Amazon. And then I also have our digestive enzymes, and this one is $17.99 on Amazon. And now let's just get into all the hard questions about metabolic health from our listeners. And if you have a question too, go ahead and put it in the chat, and then we can get an answer from Dr. Jacquie, who's our amazing expert in naturopathic medicine. All right, first question. This is from Roger Boston. He said, my daughter insisted that I ask. She's worried because my labs for blood sugar, cholesterol, and triglycerides are a little off. I have a few pounds to lose, and my blood pressure is in the 140s over 90s, but really I'm fine otherwise. My daughter keeps telling me I should do something about all that, but I work a lot, office job. I don't have much time to cook at home stuff, or go to the gym. So how do I know if I should take her nagging seriously? Is she right? And what's the easiest thing I can do that won't take me much time? Long question.
Well, it's a great question because it's very realistic. I think it's a very common health picture. And to be quite honest with you, I think metabolic syndrome exists at a higher prevalency, but we just don't diagnose it because of people like this, right? Who are, unless my arm is hanging off, I'm not going to go to the doctor or go to the hospital. And so being a little off is for them okay because it's close enough to normal. And so it's a super common case. If you wrote this question, if this is your question, or if you know someone or are someone who has a similar health picture, I wouldn't be afraid necessarily. I think fear states are never really healthy for vitality and preventing disease, right? You don't want to make it worse and stress out. But I would be concerned, healthily concerned with that kind of health picture because he lists off multiple indicators, essentially to diagnose him. Now, without seeing his labs, of course, or establishing care, we're just going off of supposition here. When we look at the 5 criteria, large waist, right? So when we have a large waist circumference, we have more fat around our organs. And so for men, 40 inches or more. For women, 35 inches or more. Okay, so that's one criteria. Number 2 is high triglyceride levels. So if he's got a little bit of high triglycerides, which I believe, I want to double check.
Yeah.
He talks about triglycerides are a little off. Right. Okay, so now we have for sure that indicator. We don't know waist circumference because we haven't taken it. Then we look at reduced good HDL cholesterol, which isn't mentioned, which is fine. But increased blood pressure, anything over 130 over 85. He's saying he's in the 140s over 90s. Clearly that's over that 130 over 85. And so that's an indicator, right? And again, not making diagnosis, just going through the actual criteria to define, metabolic syndrome. The last being elevated fasting blood sugar. Which I believe he said was a little off as well. So it looks like he's got 3 out of the 5 indicators for sure, potentially all of them. If he has a few pounds to lose, overweight or obese people tend to have, higher blood pressure. There's more body to have to pump the blood to. And so we also tend to see insulin resistance, which is the beginning stages of things like diabetes, right? And then when we see high blood pressure and high triglycerides, those are the beginning stages or warning signs of cardiovascular disease. So I wouldn't lose sleep right now because we don't know more to the health picture, but I would be healthily concerned and talk to my doctor about my labs, what they could mean, and ask questions about metabolic syndrome. See if it does fit your health picture and how, you can go about addressing different things. Now, unfortunately, this case is also very similar because let's be honest, a lot of people are saying, I work an office job, I'm really busy. It's inconvenient to cook and to meal plan and to build an exercise into my lifestyle. And I want to tell you right now that there's like a dream pill where you don't have to change your lifestyle at all. You don't have to work on your relationship with food at all. And your health just magically improves. But unfortunately, that pill has not been invented. But I'll let you know as soon as it does. And I say that, kind of tough lovingly because the reality is you got to this health picture and to this health state because you were too busy to exercise, because you over prioritized work or other activities over meal planning and prepping and going to the grocery store and learning some simple recipes to help have those healthier, easier to access days, right? For nutrition, taking your lunch to work, your dinner to work, depending on your hours, things like that. So I would start with the mental aspect first if you have resistance, because there is no shortcut with metabolic syndrome. It requires dietary changes. You have, movement, exercise is huge. Even if you just walk your dog 20 to 30 minutes a day, that's going to be better than just having the office or work, I'm assuming desk job, sitting most of the day. Doing things like, if you smoke, work on quitting smoking. If you can start replacing your fast food convenience meals 1 or 2 a week with healthier meals, home cooked meals, even if it's just a big vat of, crock pot chili or something that's healthy with vegetables and beans and things and fiber, because that's going to help drive down your cholesterol and your triglycerides. So there are little life hacks that we can do with diet, lifestyle, exercise, and create a plan specifically tailored to you and your goals, but it does require behavior change. So again, I wish there was a magic pill. There's not, but as soon as you can wrap your mind around the changes necessary for your health, and think of how awesome you're going to feel, and think about all the disease that you're going to prevent for yourself, and how you'll be there for your family and your longevity and your quality of life, I think it'll be an easy decision to get over that little hump of resistance. So those are my insights for this kind of question, in case. I hope I didn't utilize too much time. It was such a big question, Deanne, but a good one.
It was a huge question. I loved your answer, because I had my own answer to him in my head, and it was so not as kind and gentle as the way you answered
Really?
it. Oh yeah, because I look at it as like, same as you said, there's no magic bullet. Like, I wish there was a pill too, don't we all? But we all have that same 24 hours. So it's not that you don't have time to go work out, it's you chose not to. And I get that, because I'm in that same boat many, many days where I'm like, I'm too busy. But it's because I didn't prioritize it. But I could. And
that's really
do we
all
not
it
have
is.
time to, or did we just decide convenience was easier and it tasted better? So it's like, I could be ordering, and if I don't have time, well, then there's like a bazillion meal delivery services that are healthy. So have it shipped to me. But then, do I spend money on it? Okay, so now I have to choose. Do I spend money? Do I make my own? So it's just a matter of those decisions.
You're absolutely right. I was told by a professor in school, you bring up such a good point. We have 3 main resources to solve problems, like practically speaking. Obviously, there are more tools, but we utilize our time, our energy, or our money. And most tasks require at least 2. So if you want to save your time, because convenience is key, then you're going to have to spend more energy going online, ordering those foods or that Instacart, and more money, because there are fees associated to that. And there's a cost for that time convenience. But if you have more time and a lower budget, create the time to grocery shop and meal prep and learn about foods and recipes and things like that. But you're always going to utilize some sort of resource. You can never solve a problem without utilizing at least 2 of 3 of those variables. And if you think you can cheat the system, I promise you can't. You will be humbled. I've been humbled hundreds, if not thousands of times.
Yeah.
So
it's time. Yeah, like when you're dead because you died of bad health, well then guess what? All your time's gone. So it's like, now's a good time to start making those tough choices.
No, exactly. Yes. And I think it's going to take a case like that you just, the question you asked, more energy than they're clearly willing to utilize, right? And more time that they're convinced that they don't have. And so if they want to underutilize one of those things, they're going to have to spend more money, like you said, healthy foods to drop off. You can be a part of a community sustained agriculture of local farms, and you pay for weekly bundles that are delivered directly to your home. So you're eating seasonally and locally. There's so many different ways where if you pay a little bit of money, you get, again, to reap the benefits of saving those other resources, but it all comes out in the wash. So there's no cheat code. You know what I mean? And I think once we can wrap our mind around it, because it's a mental game, the body just follows the mind. So it's a mental game. If we're resistant to health, there's something blocking us there, right? It's either we don't believe we're deserving of that health. We don't want to utilize those resources to change the health. That change is going to hurt. And we're pain averse as human beings. We're wired for pleasure, to push pain and pull pleasure. Right? Which got him into this state in the first place, most likely, because being sedentary and eating delicious, fast, convenient, non-nutrient dense foods, right? in a lot of cases. That's a pattern I tend to see with metabolic syndrome cases. But anyhow, yes, it's also it's a mental game, like you said, and it's just at the end of the day, either it's a priority or it's not. And if it is, you do something about it, and if it's not, you don't. You know.
Yeah. Totally. All right, well, let's get to our second question. This is from Stephanie. So if you're listening, Stephanie, this is yours. We'll be kind and gentle. All right, here's the question. Do I need to worry about metabolic syndrome if I only have 1 or 2 symptoms?
So I wouldn't be worried about a formal diagnosis. Like if you were my patient who established care and we ran your labs and did your whole intake, and out of the 5 indicators that I just discussed, you had 1 or 2 of them, then I would definitely have that discussion with you. I would educate you on there's not enough criteria here to actually diagnose you medically with metabolic syndrome. However, I think that this is the body showing you signs that it could easily lead into that outcome within the next months or years, depending on the person, their age, their lifestyle, right? So the question, should I be worried about it? No, I wouldn't worry, because to me that connotates or implies stress, right? Or anxiety around it. And that's not what this is. This is just the body giving us feedback that, hey, dude, what you've been doing, or hey, lady, woman, didn't mean to assume gender. I really don't want to, offend anyone. Anyhow, I tangented once again. Metabolic syndrome. Should you be worried? No. Should you be concerned? Yes. Should you watch your labs? Should you track the other indicators? Should you be familiar with all 5 criteria so that if 1 or 2 other criteria change in the next few months to years, you can be aware of it. You can begin working with a physician who's familiar and can treat it. You can also start preventative measures now to address those 1 or 2 indicators so you don't develop the other indicators that push you over, the edge. So if you're out there, this is your question, or you or someone have 1 or 2 of the 5 indicators, don't stress or worry. There are ways to prevent it. Just reach out to a healthcare provider who's well versed in it, and you will be very well taken care of.
Nice. All right. So our next question coming at us from Tracy. Why is fat around my waist so important versus fat on the hips, the legs, the arms? You kind of alluded to it earlier, but
I did a little bit. And I cannot tell you how many people get frustrated with this indicator. And they're like, why does it matter what size pants I wear if I feel great? Or because a lot of times they're like comfortable in their discomfort, and they're like, oh, this pill's taking care of this issue, this pill's taking care of that issue. It shouldn't matter that much, right? Or it's because they're embarrassed or insecure about it, which I totally get, believe me. But the reason why it's so important medically speaking is because right around your waist is where all of your organs exist. All of your viscera or organ systems, the vast majority, are between your diaphragm and your hip bones, right? All your digestive organs, all your reproductive organs, your bladder and kidneys, urinary tract, your hormone producers and your adrenal glands and things like that. Obviously your heart and lungs, and then you have a lot of stuff going on in the brain. But when we look at visceral fat or organ fat, the fat can get in and on the organs, which is problematic because that fat releases certain proteins and hormones that can cause inflammation. And we all know, or if we don't know now, we will know, inflammation is the root of a lot of disease states because it's detrimental. It tears down tissue, it damages organ function, cell function. It's an inhospitable environment for our cells to function ideally. And so if our organs are constantly fighting this inflammatory state because of that extra visceral or central fat, then it's going to make everything work worse. And what's there? Our pancreas, that makes insulin for sugar, insulin resistance, right? What else is there? Our stomach, our liver. Our liver is responsible for breaking down fats and helping produce bile to do so as well. So all the special organs that do all the special cool things are basically being suffocated by adipose, in a sense, in inflammatory cells, which prevent everything from functioning right. And then that's when we see the breakdown of the systems, the insulin resistance, the high triglycerides, the blood pressure issues, the weight gain, all of that stuff. And that's why visceral fat is so important, and why waist circumference is not about vanity. It's genuinely about health, because it's such a big indicator.
And to get visceral fat down, is it like fat loss in general just kind of melts off in all places, or is there a way for people to target that? What should
Well, usually when your body has to, so first things first, 90% of your fat on your body is going to be subcutaneous, which is essentially like under the skin, right? Above the muscle and organs and stuff. That 10%, we should have just about 10% visceral. So when it gets higher than that 10% into the 15, 20, 25, then that's when we want to be concerned. And the best way to break down, because both fats break down the same. And so if you can lose weight all over, your visceral fat will naturally go down. There's not any particular way to target it per se, other than taking supportive substances to help those organs work a little more efficiently. Because once the pancreas works better and the liver works better and the stomach is digesting easier, then we're utilizing that fat as energy, right? And when we utilize that fat as energy, the visceral fat will just go down in the area because, we're utilizing it. So start by losing weight everywhere, and the visceral fat will follow. But if you can also support those digestive organs that are part of that whole process, that's going to be even more beneficial than just general weight loss, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. We'll probably get into that with the supplements coming up. One more question before we do our supplements, though, from Robbie Bobby. Could any medications I'm taking be affecting my metabolic syndrome risk factors?
Yes, absolutely. So there are certain medications, primarily they're called a class called atypical antipsychotics. So look them up if you have anything related to schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, borderline personality disorder. If you've been diagnosed with clinical depression and anxiety and put on medication, antipsychotics, for any of those reasons, sometimes, specifically olanzapine, if you're on an apine, olanzapine specifically, it increases hepatic or liver glucose production and then decreases our cell uptake of that glucose, right? And so our metabolic reactions are all over the place, and weight gain can happen pretty quickly. So that's at the top of the list. It's usually the most highly indicated, but also some hypertensive or antihypertensive agents and some contraceptions. When you're taking, I don't know if you would consider it a medication, the contraception pill, but because we're taking endogenous or external, exogenous or external hormones internally, that can mess with or our hormone balance, which our hormones are our signalers when we're hungry, when we're full, what time to eat, what time to sleep, and things like that. So any disturbance to that in some people can cause an imbalance and add to metabolic syndrome, right? Because it's adding to things like insulin resistance, or it's adding to issues around our cardiovascular system, for example, which again are part of that 5 criteria.
Okay. All right. Well, first, shout out to Andrea, who started following us. If you haven't hit the follow button, please do that. That'd be amazing. All right. Our next question is from Lisa. She said, I heard it's possible to reset the metabolic master switch using herbs. What herb does that?
There are a few that increase AMP. So AMPK is, it's a lot of letters, first and foremost, but it stands for a protein kinase, which is highly responsible for our metabolic rate, right? It's an enzyme that helps our central energy control switch. And so it's often known as the metabolic master switch, because it helps dictate how to utilize energy that our body has, or our uptake of energy. And so they found that different things like intermittent fasting, let's say, will increase it. Eating extra dietary fiber and exercise can increase it. But when it comes to herbs, there's a very particular group of herbs, and they usually center around certain actions. So you remember how we talked about alkaloids with berberine? That's a perfect example, because there are alkaloids in berberine and also alkaloids in bitter melon. There are saponins in plants like ginseng. There are flavonoids in anything that, fruit or vegetable that is a color, a bright color, has flavonoids. Resveratrol in grapes and grape skin, right? These all have those magic ingredients. So are they medicinal herbs? Are they dietary? Is it a combination of both? It's going to be both in that sense. But if we're talking about herbs specifically, especially ones I've utilized to address metabolic syndrome, it's going to be the berberine, the bitter melon, and the ginseng, mostly. Those are the three big ones. Reishi mushroom also can be helpful with that process. So, in mushrooms in general, they're just amazing, though. That's a whole nother combo.
That's a whole other show, our mushroom show. All right, well, we had a question from Cheryl H. She said she was asking about our middle world with berberine with bitter melon, and she just said, okay, where's the supplement? So I'm happy to take this one, give you a little break. So basically, made here in the US, we have a video of our manufacturing to show you. And it's in Georgia specifically, where they're made in a GMP certified facility. GMP stands for Good Manufacturing Practices, and it's a certification given in recognition of the fact that the products are consistently produced, controlled, and adhere to quality standards. So we get FDA announced and unannounced inspections. We test each lot in independent labs before shipping it out. So some of the things we check for are potency, purity, and if there's any heavy metals or contaminants. So only if they pass all those tests do your products get shipped out to you. So that's pretty cool. Also, if you were wondering what the color is of the berberine with bitter melon, it's this beautiful bright yellow color. So good potency and purity there. All right, next question coming from Lancelot. Says, my doctor told me I'm pre-diabetic, and you're laughing at the fun
yeah,
names.
That's a cool name.
And I like the way you spelled it, Lance a lot. All right, my doctor told me I'm pre-diabetic and recommended that I try eating bitter melon. I tried and it tastes awful. Nothing seems to mask the bitter taste. What's your advice?
Great question. So for those of you who may or may not know, bitter melons are these bright green, darkish bright green. They're probably about this big, I want to say. They almost look like overgrown lemons because they're fat and then they taper on the edge. And they're studded with these little knobs, almost like a gourd or a squash. Melon, right? Surprise, surprise. But anyhow, so if you're going to eat them for their medicinal qualities, they are really, really bitter, specifically the seeds. So first, if you're not, try removing the seeds. That's going to be super important. You can also soak it for a few hours in things that are higher in fat, like yogurt or kefir or milk, to help draw out that bitterness before you cook it. Also cooking it versus eating it raw, right? That's pretty ambitious to eat it raw. But if you don't want to cook it in soups and stews and things like that, and you want to keep it raw, or you want the antioxidants as well, then you can juice it with kind of sweeter, juicier fruits and vegetables. Carrots are pretty sweet, apples, pineapple even. Just do something to counterbalance the bitter. But also, if dietarily it's just too much trouble or the trial and error doesn't seem worth it, the juice isn't worth the squeeze kind of thing, then the supplement is obviously going to be, the best shortcut, just because it has the dried version of the plant in the capsule at, an ideal concentration and amount that you would want to be taking, that you would get from food. But obviously food is thy medicine, and so you get to decide which route you want to go. But I'm glad you're giving bitter melon a try, and I love your name. Your handle's pretty cool. Lancelot.
That's right. I mean, I've never tried actual bitter melon. I don't know if I've even seen it in the stores, but I've tried this many times. Tasteless, amazing. So I'll have to look for some bitter melon.
There you go. Yeah.
There we go. Although I don't know, I'm like the first guy. I'm like, do I want to sit there and juice it, or should I just pop a pill? Easy convenience.
And you also have to go to specialty markets, a lot of times like Asian markets and things like that, to find them. Because as far as I understand, they're not indigenous to here in America. I mean, I could be wrong, but anyhow, yes, I agree with you. Oh, also, if you are going to try to juice it out there, please don't have more than 1 or 2 a day, because they can induce diarrhea and nausea and stuff like that if you have too much bitter stuff in a day. So just one or two of those tiny little guys, scoop the seeds out, just the flesh in the juicer. Or again, like Deanne said, tasteless, easy. She pops. I mean, how many do you take?
During our lives, I always take one.
Well, there you go.
But I'm not.
So just one.
Yeah. Yeah, the serving
Easy.
size on this is just one. Yeah, it's super easy. You only have to take one.
There you go.
I think you can do one a day, so preferably with a meal. So yeah. Okay, our next question is actually more about this. So let's see. We have Cheryl asking, what exactly is in the supplement? So I can jump in here and share some of the ingredients. So our formula includes berberine HCl, which is 500 milligrams, and that's per serving. Again, like I just said, serving is one capsule, and then you can do 1 to 2 a day. Additionally, bitter melon fruit extract, there's 100 milligrams per capsule, and banana leaf, 25 milligrams per capsule. This is that beautiful capsule right here. And then it's only $19.79. And the bottle will last you 2 months. So 2 months. And we have a 20% off deal going on right now during a live. So if you grab that, actually that's with the discount. You'll get your 20%. That'll bring the price down to $19.79. So pretty killer deals. All right, Dr. Jacquie, come jump back in here. Share more about the properties of banana leaf.
Yeah, of course. It makes a lot of sense why banana leaf was added to berberine. They definitely would potentiate each other, like help each other work better. But banana leaves just essentially are pretty incredible because of their ability to lower blood sugar. I mean, you can take banana leaf in the form of tea or the capsule. Within 60 minutes, blood glucose levels will drop, like they will be lowered. You will be biologically affected. This isn't something that's aggregate, meaning you have to take it every day for weeks or months before you notice an effect. It's pretty immediate, which is pretty powerful. It's also really high in antioxidants, which, as we know, addresses oxidative stress, which prevents inflammation being one of the roots of a lot of diseases. So it's going to check a lot of boxes outside of just lowering blood sugar and acting like insulin. It will be antioxidant in that pathway as well, and in that organ system, which is pretty awesome. You know, people who have diabetes or prediabetes definitely need that anti-inflammatory, antioxidant effect, as well as helping the body's substances, like the hormone insulin, work more efficiently. So it's great. It does a lot, you know? And that's why I love herbs, to be honest with you, because they're like a whole symphony. You know, there's an instrument area for each action that it does, and it all comes together to effectively, like, yeah, there's maybe a main player or action, if you will, but there's all this support, you know, coming through when you use the whole herb or its particular part that has all the special, you know, magic in it. It's just so powerful. It's kind of funny, but also not, how specific nature is to our biology. You know, how there are plants that directly connect with certain receptors and certain cells in our body, like specifically. I think that's pretty powerful stuff. So why not capitalize, you know?
It's super fun. And the fact that somebody discovered that and figured it out, like, it's all fascinating.
I know!
I'll walk by like a blade of grass and we're not like, let me go try that right now. How does that, you know, but somebody had to figure it out.
Notes of chlorophyll.
Yeah, that's true. But I'm gonna, yeah, I mean, how's it? I don't know. But it's fascinating. It's just so fascinating. All right, so let's go to Marty's question. That's next. What is the root cause of metabolic syndrome? How does it start?
Ooh, so there are a lot of theories that there are genetic components. So people who have like family history of certain illnesses like hyperlipidemia, let's say, like some people genuinely, I have a couple of patients, a few people who are normal weight, have no other issues, but their liver just does not function as productively or efficiently. And so they just have high cholesterol, and for all intents and purposes, everything else is fine. And so you can't really cheat genetics, but you can manage and work with it. So there is a genetic component to certain things, like how the liver functions, especially, or how hormones function in the body. But outside of genetics, the root cause of metabolic syndrome really is going to be diet and movement. It's diet and lifestyle, to be honest with you, because obesity and being overweight is kind of at the center of things like insulin resistance and diabetes, of cardiovascular illness and hypertension or high blood pressure, or of hyperlipidemia, right? Of high waist circumference. When do we see all 5 of those indicators? And there is a very high correlation of that population being overweight or in the obese category. And so that's usually the root cause of obesity can be very different depending on the person. Overeating, but again, genetically, hormones. If you just don't make the right hormones or the right time, amounts, times, kinds, you know, your body's not going to communicate with other organ systems well enough. Hormones are chemical messengers. It's like a long game of telephone, right? Imagine a couple of the lines being dead. The information isn't going to get through, and you can't really help that. So you have to, you know, utilize the other lines of communication. But anyhow, if it's not genetic, it's usually the root cause is being obese, which usually the root cause of obesity is relationship to food, convenience, and just lacking skills in education in a lot actually of cases. They don't know where to eat, how to shop, how to cook, how to meal prep, what things are, why nutrition is important. So to me, if I were to peel back all the onion layers and you really were to ask me what the root cause of metabolic syndrome is, it's lack of awareness of the healthy foundations of diet and movement. To be honest, that's really what it is.
Yeah.
And everything from there, eating habits, okay, let's address it. Obesity, okay, let's address it. Hormones, okay, let's address it, right? So that's really the foundation, the pattern of the root that I've seen.
Okay, so now we know the root. What if somebody wants to reverse it? Will they have it for their life, or is that even?
Oh, you can 100% reverse metabolic syndrome because you don't have actual diabetes. You don't have actual cardiovascular disease. You don't have, you know, an actual blockage yet. That's been shown yet, or what's the word I'm looking for? Detected yet, right? So the disease states haven't reached their actual disease state. Metabolic syndrome is where everything across the board is whispering to you, like, I'm on the tipping line, right? I'm on the top of the precipice. If you keep doing what you're doing, you're gonna push me over, right? But if you catch me now, I'm willing to come back down the mountain with you. I'm willing to take a step back to address it and essentially heal thyself, pardon me, is what metabolic syndrome, when we can reverse it, right? So you get to decide if you do have metabolic syndrome, if you have a couple of the factors that we discussed tonight, your body's on a precipice and it's leaning. It's got one foot in wanting to heal and prevent and turn back time, in a sense, and one foot in full-blown disease states. So, you know, what side of the fence are you going to tip? So yes, you can definitely reverse it, is my point. And I have, and it's amazing and miraculous, and people think it's magic when it's really not. You know, it's just biohacking. So it's very possible.
That's good. That's good. You know, it's funny as you said that, and we'll get into the whispers in a little bit, but they have them on these little charms on all the bottles, and this one's like just happens to be facing me. It says, "Hearing your body's whispers avoids listening to its screams," and that's just looking at me right now. So you just, my message of the day, clearly the universe wants me to hear that.
Yes, that's what metabolic syndrome is. That's literally what it is it's whispering to you before your body is going to scream. So, you know, It's all up to you if you want to prevent that scream and listen to those whispers.
Yeah. So this is a really important topic, definitely for all of us. Okay. Our next question comes from Erica Fox. I was very surprised to hear that something as basic as probiotics can help with metabolic conditions and even with insulin resistance. Is that true?
Yes, absolutely. So probiotics keep the good bacteria populated, like stronger than bad bacteria. Feces and just excrement in general has both. That's just how, you know, it exists. But as long as the good stuff outweighs the bad stuff, then we have pretty good digestion. We're making nutrition, immune cells, serotonin, all that stuff's working. So when we have too much bad bacteria, maybe we don't get enough probiotics or we don't take a probiotic. Bad bacteria release methane gas. We're all familiar with that. But that actually slows down metabolism, and it affects the way that your insulin and leptin work. So leptin is the hormone that you release, your fat cells release, that says, hey, I'm full. I have enough energy, right? So ghrelin makes you hungry. Grr, my stomach's growling. I have too much ghrelin. And then when you reach a certain satiety, your fat cells release leptin and say, hey, I'm full. We can stop. So you get leptin resistance. You get resistant to your own body signaling saying, I'm full. When bad bacteria outnumbers good bacteria. So to make sure that we maintain that balance, we can, lower inflammation in the GI tract. We can help with management of weight because, again, certain bacteria and yeast like Candida will sometimes, when we have an overgrowth, it's a yeast that having a normal amount in the GI tract is fine. But when we get overgrowth of that yeast will crave sugar. Anybody who's ever baked a loaf of bread knows how do you bloom the yeast is you add a little bit of sugar to feed it. And so what will happen is you'll get this feedback loop to crave sugar to feed the yeast, to keep it growing, to crave sugar to feed the yeast, to keep it going. So the benefit of probiotics is it keeps the bad bacteria, yeast, and all that stuff at bay so that they don't get overnumbered to the point of really kind of controlling us via appetite signals. And then when we overeat, what happens? We gain weight, insulin resistance, heart stuff, triglyceride stuff. It's just like a domino effect, essentially. So probiotics are very important for that reason, for sure.
Definitely. All right, and I have mine right here. We'll be talking about that. So Tony G asked a really good question. How will I take and I'm going to take this one. So you can take a little break on this one. How are your probiotics better? That's the question. How are our probiotics better than others? So I'll give you guys the answer on that one. So basically, this one, our pre and probiotic supplement, is really not like a lot of the other ones out there. New patented generation of probiotics. So in our formula, we use this new technology called Perfor Pro. And what's unique about that is that in each capsule, the probiotics, which are the good bacteria, are accompanied by these friendly phages on their way through the digestive system. And those phases are crowding out the bad bacteria. So they're getting rid of all the bad stuff so that the good stuff can come in and form their colonies. So this allows for more good bacteria, which is what you want in your digestive system. And we want those to not die by the millions on their way to the gut. So a lot of supplements on the market might have like a really high CFU amount. And you think like, oh, 100 billion, that's how many I need. But then it doesn't actually get to your digestive system because they die on the way. So ours is 4.4 billion CFUs, which may sound low, but because of this technology and smart system to get them to your gut, you have way more surviving. So it's very potent, and that's one of the huge advantages of this one. You're going to have more good bacteria thanks to that. So Tony, if you're considering, what to buy, there's so many out there. I get it. It can be really confusing. This one's a great one. It's $22.99. Plus you're getting the pre and probiotics. And a lot of our customers will even subscribe monthly, and then you get 10% off that way. So you're getting 20% off during our live. You get 10% off when you subscribe monthly. So definitely some good deals to be had. And for me, probiotics are a must-have. They're like a way of life. I keep these in my medicine cabinet, so a subscription would definitely be great, but I also consume probiotics almost daily through kombucha as well. So gotta have that good gut digestion for sure. All right, next question. This one's from Anna P. I'm confused about the role of sugar and fat in developing the diseases that make up metabolic syndrome. So sugar, is that for diabetes? And she's saying, is that for high blood pressure? So that correlation correct?
I mean, in the most broad sense, sugar and diabetes is an okay connection. Is sugar inherently bad? No. Is too high of a blood sugar over time making your body work really hard, produce insulin, pull the sugar in the cell? You eat more insulin into the cell. You eat more insulin into the cell, right? So you're exercising that pathway so often. So it's like sugar isn't inherently bad. And I don't want people to make certain bad connotations or connections, because it's not about being perfect dietarily speaking. It's about limiting the things that can insult our health. So little sugar is fine. Fruit sugar is fine. Like, don't overcorrect. But yes, also, if you're looking at your diet and you do an intake, let's say for 24 hours or 3 days or 7 days, and you note that a lot of your intake is sugar, right? And you have signs of prediabetes, that's a very clear connection that sugar could be potentially pushing you into the world of diabetes, right? And then same with fat. So fat doesn't inherently cause high blood pressure. And it's kind of twofold. So I'm interpreting this as dietary fat, because we can also have body fat, subcutaneous adipose. So fat in the sense of physical fat, when we accumulate actual fat cells, we have to create blood vessels to keep those fat cells alive. So that puts more strain on the cardiovascular system. It also means that the heart, which is one single organ for the whole cardiovascular system, has to pump much harder to get blood to those tiny new little capillaries all over, right? The heart has to work less to support somebody at 180 pounds versus 280 pounds versus 380 pounds. There's much more cardiovascular system to have to support, and the heart doesn't really change size. You get one, it doesn't really renew itself. At the most, if you do have enlarged heart, that just means that it's been lifting weights too much. What happens when we over exercise, or we exercise a lot with a lot of resistance? We get bulky. The heart can do the same thing, but when the heart gets bulky, its chambers get smaller. So then the heart has to beat faster and harder, faster and harder. Okay. So when we talk about subcutaneous fat causing high blood pressure, that is an actual cause and effect fact, pardon me. But when we talk about dietary fat causing high blood pressure, dietary fat actually causes more atherosclerosis, which are those plaques that form in the wall of arteries, that hardened artery, and that can create cardiovascular disease, which we often see with hypertension. But ingesting fat and it causing hypertension directly, medically speaking, scientifically speaking, I would be incorrect if I said that was a fact. So there's a relationship is my point, but I don't want anyone, I think sometimes, and I've had this, and this is why I'm probably saying this, is I've had time and time again patients go online with Google and they're looking things up and they're just like, so what's the easiest way? And the nuance, right, is hard to grasp, because not sugar can be bad in excess. Not all sugar is bad. Our body needs sugar to exist. How do we eat sugar when it's bad for us? And then their brain explodes, right? So I don't want to be making these hard and fast rules. Moderation is key. But in terms of the diseases that make up metabolic syndrome and the role of sugar and fat, just don't eat a lot of high processed sugar. Don't eat a lot of high saturated fats. Those are the things that add to things like diabetes, like obesity, like high triglycerides, and like hypertension. So yes, diets very, very high are primarily focused on those two food groups. Can be very, very problematic. But also, have the cake. Eat the pizza if you want. Just go for a walk the next day, right? Or have a salad for lunch the next day, right? Just all out in the wash. It's just not every day, for weeks, for months, for years at a time. That's how disease happens, everyone, right? It's not a cheat day. You're a human. It's called eating whatever the heck I want day. You're not cheating on anything. It's just consuming different types of calories. It's just about the habitual nature of it. When it happens for months or years, disease happens. And I know I just said that, but I just really want to hit that home because I think it's an important thing to grasp mentally, when it comes to health in general.
Mm-hmm. Totally. I think that's so important. No, that's really good. All right. Another question from Daisy. If metabolic issues are mainly caused by our diet, then if we help our body digest what we eat, break down all the fats, sugars, and carbs properly, then we shouldn't develop any metabolic problems. Am I thinking correctly?
You are mostly right, somewhat right. Because I can't, no matter how well you digest food, I can't control genetics if your hormones are going to work properly or not, right? If your chemical messengers aren't going to communicate. You could digest perfectly all day long and still your body just has something in its blueprint that, doesn't make enough thyroid hormone, or that feedback loop is broken or something like that. Anyhow, so if it's not a genetic issue, and it is primarily dietarily related and absorption related, there is a big relationship there. Because what's the digestive tract, its job overall? It's to take big pieces of food and turn it into tiny micronutrients, small enough that they can be absorbed through our intestines into our blood. Do you know how small they have to get to be single amino acids, right? Single glucose molecules, single cholesterol molecule. Like, these are very, very tiny, and there's a lot of steps in between. And so starting with chewing, for example, all the way down to elimination. And so it's very difficult to have every single step perfect. So I wouldn't hyper focus on getting everything perfect. But yes, if you know you have a digestive issue in one or more of your organs, or if you have consistent constipation, diarrhea, bloating, gas, acid reflux, all these things having to do with the digestive tract, I wouldn't be surprised if that is on some level adding to your metabolic issue, because the body can't absorb big clunky molecules. It needs the nice tiny ones. Just, for it shouldn't work that hard, because when it works that hard and tries to absorb big clunky pieces of things, we're not absorbing. And if anything, the body's trying to accommodate these big clunky molecules coming through, and in the same time toxins can sometimes come through, and so that's also problematic. So yes, work on your digestion, make sure it's as efficient as possible and working for you as well as possible. And that's going to be a huge factor in how well your metabolism works, but it's not the only factor, if that makes sense.
No, that totally makes sense. And since we're talking about digestive enzymes, so this is our digestive enzyme formula by Middle World Herbs. It is $16.19 on Amazon, and they contain a broad spectrum of enzymes. So you're going to be 18 different types of enzymes. And enzymes in this formula are just going to help you break down your foods from 9 different food groups. That includes proteins, carbs, fats, cellulose, sugars, insoluble fibers, lactose, and gluten. So I find it's good to keep it like in my purse, especially if I'm going to go out for like girls' night and we're going to a restaurant and I just want to like have everything, with all my girls, and we're ordering a lot of appetizers. To me, it's just good. It's good to have it. Take it 20 minutes before your meal, and it will definitely help with all your digesting. Okay, next question, and we have time for just a couple more. This is from Talking Tree 56, asked Dr. Jacquie. This is one where it gets a little different. So because you've been to ashrams and stuff before, he wants to know what chakras to focus on if we're talking about metabolic issues.
So I love this question. So in Hindu culture, where chakras and balance and things like that are important, or are part of assessing imbalance, the third chakra, known as the solar plexus, is the color yellow, and it sits right on top of the stomach and radiates out over what we think of the pancreas, liver, spleen, small intestines, like all of that whole area. So that's really what it governs. And it's right in the center of our abdomen, essentially. Well, it's high center. And so that chakra, the solar plexus chakra, third chakra, yellow chakra, however you want to connect with it, the idea is that it governs a certain process. It has a main physical manifestation in an organ. And so just to kind of go down the list really quickly, as it relates to chakras at least, is it governs the production of how we utilize energy, especially with assimilating food, taking energy from outside and, processing it, transforming it, and then releasing what's no longer needed. So not only do we have an energy body that does that with the energy, emotions, things going on around us, but we have that internally in our digestive tract. And so the solar plexus represents all of those things that are happening. So the element is fire, because you need what's called agni, or digestive fire. That's where, acid in the stomach, because acid can burn, fire can burn. We want to make sure that we have enough of that fire and that hunger within us, not just for food, but for life. And when we don't have enough for life, we tend to overeat with food. When we tend to get overconsumed with life, we tend to eat less food. Some of us who get so anxious, we have no appetite, for example. So it externalizes or manifests in the organ system. The pancreas is also yellow. It's a yellow organ when you think of it. It lies right underneath the stomach in a very similar area. And so the emotion behind it is feeling powerful, feeling like you are within your power to transform. You're in your own authority. You're metabolizing energy from food and from the world. You're taking out what's yours. You're getting rid of what no longer serves you. It's like sun rays. It's warmth. It's because, again, it's the home of fire. It's where your fire comes from. Something lit a fire in your belly. If you've ever heard that saying, that's that chakra. So some excesses, if you have emotional excesses in this chakra, if you experience, you're very quick to rage, you have a very short fuse. If you have irritability, maybe lack of boundaries, things like that, then you probably have issues in this area. So physical, like when we transition from looking at chakras into actual medicine, like Ayurvedic medicine and then holistic medicine, we see the physical disease manifestations when this chakra is imbalanced. Things like hepatitis, ulcers, gastritis, eating disorders, diabetes, pancreatitis, just any of the things that can happen with the GI organs, really. Malabsorption, diarrhea, of course, metabolic syndrome, right? Because a lot of it is happening like in this general area. So anyhow, that is the chakra and a little bit about the chakra and the area, how it manifests, how you can tell if it's imbalanced. Eating yellow foods, wearing yellow colors, focusing on yellow gemstones, yellow flowers, yellow things in your environment, really connecting to your inner source of power, finding your voice to set healthy boundaries without becoming rageful, but also without playing meek. That's really that sense of that quiet, powerful confidence, where you genuinely trust and believe that you're capable, and you're making that exchange regularly, that fire. That's really that chakra. So if you don't feel that fire, if you have digestive stuff, if you lack boundaries and you're super angry but maybe afraid to show it, maybe it's time to connect to some yellow.
It's some yellow. Yes, I love that. What's purple? I'm wearing my little stone right now.
So you have blue, so it kind of goes up the rainbow. So your root is red, and then you have kind of in your pelvis, your second is orange, then yellow, your heart is green, your throat is blue, then you have almost like this blue indigo kind of combo in your third eye, and then like this magenta-y purple violet kind of mixture is going to come out through your crown. It's like your highest ascendant. It's how you connect to source. It's how you receive messages of intuition, of just knowing, right? And so when that's blocked or too much, it's usually overthinking, not trusting yourself, not trusting the universe or God or whatever it is your belief system is in. It's, you want to be plugged in and be able to receive and be a conduit. And so if you're blocking that, sometimes you can just overanalyze. I call it analysis paralysis. And I'm very familiar with that territory. Probably why purple's one of my favorite colors, honestly. But yeah, so purple's going to really help open that up for you and just kind of get that. Cool. I want to download messages. What do I need to see, hear, feel that I'm not, So that can be pretty powerful for some people. It's very, very healing.
Yeah.
Purple.
One of my favorite colors too. I mean, obviously.
Yeah.
I love purple. All right. Well, I think that's all the time we have. This was such a great episode. So hopefully everyone got something out of it. Hit that follow button. Check out the supplements and always ask questions. They might show up in a future episode and we'll be happy to answer them. So that's it for me. Do you want to say goodbye?
I just want to say thank you again for always having me. And I love our talks and all these cool questions. And I hope that people out there are finding benefit in it. And I thank you so much for sharing your time and energy tonight. I will see you in future Amazon Lives.
Yes. We're still on. There we go.
Hear the whispers from within, balance to restore, ailings to relieve. Feel the nature keeping us, nature healing us. Flowers, leaves, and roots within. Hear the mind calming you, soothing you. Love and kindness inside out. Let the herbs from Middle World. Feel welcome wellness. Welcome wellness. It's revealed herbs, Middle World herbs.